Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Devavrat Shaw. I'm co-founder, co-CEO at Ikigai Labs. I'm also a professor at MIT, where I've been teaching statistics, machine learning, or now, of course, everything we call AI for past 19 years. You see, AI is on everybody's mind. Likely that's why we're all here. Somebody is thinking about investing in AI. Ashu has been thinking for a long time. Somebody is thinking about building companies in AI. We are thinking, many of you are thinking, and working very hard towards that. Many of you are in amazing large organization where you are thinking about both internally and externally how to think about bringing AI. Every board wants to think about AI strategy as if ESG and everything related to ethics, and then everything related to work from home, and all of that stuff was not enough. But now that we are here, let's talk about AI. Okay, so jokes apart, clearly there's a huge opportunity here. Just the way personal computing in 90s and cloud in 2000s has changed the way we do our enterprise work day to day, AI is going to change it. So the question, at least for me, on top of my mind, is how do we bring AI to enterprises? And what I want to do is I want to discuss our thesis, the thesis that has guided us to build Ikigai. I want to discuss that. I want to have a dialogue with you. I want to have a conversation with my both my esteemed panelist colleagues, as well as all of you who are here. Get your thoughts, get your feedback, and share our ideas. Now, thesis is very simple for us, okay? And it starts as follows. All of us use software apps. AI needs to embed into software apps. Okay? And if that's what it is, then we need three things to do that. One, everybody needs to know how to work with AI embedded software apps. And that's a very loaded thing, because not just you need to understand what AI can or cannot do, you also need to educate yourself about it. And I'll talk more about it in a second. So first, it's about education related to AI. And it is a multifaceted, multidimensional. I'll talk about that in a second. Second, we need to embed AI into software apps. See, cloud has been around for more than 2 decades, and it's just peaking, the cloud migration. It took a long time. So let's make sure that sort of AI migration is not that slow. Let's make sure that it's happening fast enough. And that means that we need something that enables us to bring embedded AI into our software apps easily, quickly. So the second piece. And the third piece is data in enterprise is text, data in enterprise is images, but data in enterprise is also tabular, typically time-stamped. So what we need is AI building blocks for all of these data altogether. So those are the three things, and that's what sort of has driven us at Ikigai to do things, and that's sort of the foundations of our thesis. Okay. So now in next few minutes, and again, I won't take this long, because really it's a conversation is the important here. So I'll quickly sort of double click on each of these three pieces, and then we'll open up for the conversation. Or as Paul would say, what we should do next. Okay. So in terms of coming to education. So with AI, for example, nothing is exact, right? Nothing is precise. For example, I have an amazing AI algorithm that allows me to go to a casino and have odds against house, which is 51%. If I'm clever enough, if I'm patient enough, then I can come up with a strategy and bring the house down. But for that, I need patience, I need strategy. But if I don't have either of those, then maybe AI should help me come up with a better risk profile, better way to manage it, and then sort of do that. The point is that sort of, unlike traditional AI, when I started at MIT as a probabilist, nobody would consider me as AI because, of course, it was all deterministic. So the way we think about AI now, nothing is deterministic, and that's how the right way to think about it. One has to think that way. With AI, exception is a norm, not exception, which means that we need to deal with it, we need to work with it, we need to bring experts in the loop to deal with that to get better. Okay. One joke that all my control theory colleagues always tell me is that GPS is always correct, right? Because GPS tells you you've reached when you reach, so it's never wrong. However wrong it has gotten in the middle. So the point is that that's a terrible way to evaluate. So it's not just about getting things right at the end, but also getting things right all the way till we get there. Okay. And finally, AI, like any other technology, is going to change the way we work, right? Some jobs are going to be lost. It's a fact. All of our jobs likely going to change in different ways. And many more jobs will be created. My hope, our hope is that more will be gained than lost. But to do that well, we need skilling, upskilling, reskilling. Okay? So let's be thoughtful about it. Let's be generous about it. Let's be agile and have speed about it. Let's think through a way to do that so that there is an opportunity that's created not just for us, but for everyone, so that there is at least a little better level playing field globally, not just here. I come from Boston, so I can sort of also say that. So in short, if you think from education perspective, really three things need to happen. One is, as an exec, you need to think about where you can bring AI, how you bring AI, what is the value of it, how do you do change management and all that stuff. If you are a builder, you want to think about how you can sort of build AI solutions quickly. And if you are thinking about AI, which you should think about sort of what AI can or cannot do. And it's not just about equations, right? It's about sort of what can be done. It's like, it's one thing to know how to do long form division. It's another thing to press a button on an iPad and know what division can do, right? And I'm talking about the second one, not the first one. But first one would be nice too. Anyway, so that's education part. In terms of easy and fast, one of the primary reason why AI has been challenging to bring to enterprise, and again, one stats that I read recently from McKinsey report, which said that 85% of AI projects don't see day of light. Okay, and still we spent close to 400+ billion last year, and then of course now AI is budget item, so it will be spending a lot more. And the reason is that to do an AI project, you need to commit a lot. You need to commit months, if not a year, a lot of resources. It becomes an expensive thing. And the first experiment that you do in your organization, if it fails by chance, which is likely, it's done for a few years, right? So really what we need to do is not to sort of think about this Times Square advertisement model, but what is the Google advertisement model of AI? There's how do we do quickly, easily, so that not just chosen few, but many can bring AI to enterprise. Okay, and what this means is that we need a good full-featured AI app platform that can embed AI into enterprises. So that's second. And the third, data in enterprise, again, text, images is great. Okay, the foundational model, which learn on the world's all data, they're fantastic. They have done one amazing thing. It's like they have provided a human-friendly interface to machine. It's like now I don't need to worry about going to an orthopedic and who would ask me question, how is your pain in your back on scale 1 to 10, because I don't understand that. All it will feel like I'm going to an optometrist who will always show me, is this better or is that better? It's like a very human-friendly. So in that sense, text, image, ability to deal, we have got perfect app interfaces, but they're like very nice droids, right? They can talk to you, maybe they will sympathize with you. You ask them for water, they'll say, okay, I know I need to get you water, but they need a tap. To fill the tap water, you need a water tap, and that's your enterprise data, which is typically tabular, sparse, disparate. So you want to learn patterns from it. You want to do something about it. You want to fill missing values. If your typically data is disparate everywhere, you want to somehow stitch quickly together. Maybe generate new data that looks like it. If it's time series, temporal data, you want to forecast. You want to understand what were the missing values that you did not observe. Learn relationship, do scenario analysis, build outcome-driven simulations, and so on and so forth. This requires one to have building blocks of enterprise tabular data. Okay, so those are the three things I believe that sort of would enable us to bring AI to embed into software apps, which we are going to use in enterprises. And that's what we have done at Ikigai. We're spending a lot of time building our academy. Paul, who leads here, built a platform. If any one of you is interested in playing with it, reach out to any one of us. And happy to talk forever about our technology graphical model, because that's what I think about. At the end of the day, I'm an academic. Okay, so well, thank you.
Thank you. The reason we're here is thanks to Ashu Garg, who had the foresight to invest in us. But beyond us, Ikigai Labs, he's obviously general partner here at Foundation Capital and has done a really amazing job in investing as a pioneer in the AI space. Some of the great investments he's made, Databricks, Cohesity, Eightfold, where Kamal was before, Turing, Anyscale, Alcyon, and many, many others, including us. We hope to be amongst those that list there.
Databricks.
But before Foundation, he actually has some sort of chops in the field, working at Microsoft as a general manager for their online advertising business, which was fairly large and still pretty good. Led field marketing, the software business, did a whole bunch of work at a company called McKinsey. So the slide decks that we built perhaps could use some improvement if you'd be willing to do that for us.
That was a jab, actually. Yeah.
And so sort of also worked in Unilever's Nepal operation. So incredibly delighted to have you on the panel. Next to him, Kelley Steven-Waiss. Kelley and I go way back, perhaps too far back. We went to high school together, actually. And she got an amazing role now. She has at ServiceNow as Chief Transformation Officer, helping customers drive workforce transformation. So she's able to sort of, I'm sure, resonated with a lot of the ideas that are here. What's the sort of potential reality, something that you can probably key in on. She was, more importantly, the founder and CEO of Hitchworks, which was acquired by ServiceNow, as a sort of a little bit of AI in there. So she brings some knowledge of that space. She's serves on the board of FormFactor, which is listed on NASDAQ, and the chair of the advisory board for the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. So I think a sort of a running thread through this panel is education for sure. More importantly, she has written not just one but two books. The most recent, Valley Girls, Lessons from Female Founders in the Silicon Valley and Beyond, which I believe can be pre-purchased now. So that's...
Yeah, it comes out March 5th, so we're here, almost.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Thank you, Kelley, for joining the panel. So I like to tell my wife I have three bosses. Kamal Ahluwalia, I have Devavrat Shaw here, and where's Vinayak? Vinayak Ramesh in the back there. So I have...
That's perfect. You have no bosses.
Wait, but you have a fourth boss then. Your wife.
Yeah, that's right. She reigns supreme. Anyway. So Kamal is president of Ikigai Labs, previously president of Eightfold.ai, where he and I connected. Before that, he was doing lots of work in the Silicon Valley, really focused on go-to-market, including at Aptus, where he led software solutions and market leadership in a bunch of different categories, beating the likes of SAP, Oracle, and others to the market. Kamal is also an author. He wrote a book as a co-author with What's Next for You, The Eightfold Path to Transforming the Way We Hire and Manage Talent, something that I know we all care about here in this room as well. And finally, Devavrat Shaw, as co-CEO of Ikigai Labs and the Andrew and Irma Viterbi Professor of Electrical Engineering at a place called Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT for short, where he's been teaching since 2005. He wears a hat as an entrepreneur, having created a company called Select, which was purchased by Nike, focused on really predictive analytics platform for retailers. He too is a Stanford graduate, so fist bump for that. I've got my Stanford socks on in case you didn't notice. PhD in computer science and a bachelor's from the Indian Institute of Technology. So that rounds out the list. I have a bunch of questions that I'd like to ask, but keeping with the sort of informal nature, if someone wants to sort of raise their hand around a particular issue or question, I think I can run the mic out to you. Does that sound fair? I'm going to start with Devavrat, especially in and around, one of the reasons I joined Ikigai Labs was because of the focus around really critical strategy around education. As someone who's passionate about this space, talk a little bit about the concept that we have at Ikigai called expert in the loop. Why is that so important, and what role do you see as we think about sort of education? What does that expert need to know?
Picking up on the thread around education, around AI not being precise, and exception always is a norm. If you start thinking from the perspective of, this is an interesting sort of a conversation that Kamal and I had just around the time Kamal was joining, and he was talking to me. I was telling him about this expert in the loop, and he says, yes, I remember. He likes Tesla a lot. Okay, so this is all with due respect to Tesla, that he was using the self-driving version of the Tesla and then going through one of those, what do you call it? Toll booth on San Mateo, and then he trusted AI a little too much at that time. And then, so of course, few not so good things happened. But then if he, as an expert in the loop, had gotten into it just for the toll booth, everything would have been fine. Now, that is a point, there will be situations where we will need experts. We will constantly need experts because things will constantly change. Nothing is fixed. If everything is fixed, there is zero entropy, and of course, as we know, that's not how the world is, right? So things will change by design. And as far as we think about AI and regulation, with compliance, expert is the best way to deal with those things, at least in short term, if not for long term. How do we build systems that are not just sort of one way, but sort of working together? That is something, on one hand, we require sort of a better AI systems. On the other hand, we also need people who understand what AI can or cannot do. What do these things mean? And that's where sort of education becomes extremely important. And again, education comes into multiple layers, whether it's just understanding what the output of an AI system is, to interpreting it, to thinking about it in a short-term and a long-term strategy, to actually thinking about how does one influence the AI system itself. So again, sort of, it's not about necessarily learning equations or coding things up or sort of designing algorithms, but it is about sort of at a basic foundational level, understanding the input-output view of the world. And I think that's essential at many skills, and I can keep going. But I think sort of Paul just looked at it saying that sort of this is a good time to sort of take a break.
Shifting gears. Not taking a break. We're still on it for a little while here. So, Ashu, you're a pioneer investor in the AI space. You give us a sense maybe of the then and the now. What was the investment thesis back then, back in the day? And then what do you see now, and especially as it relates to enterprises, and all of us work in enterprises?
So, at some level, for those of you who've been around, AI is not a new idea. Some flavor of the technology has been around for many decades. I think what's changed is the computation, the cost of computation, and to a lesser extent storage, has changed dramatically. And that's enabled us to do a lot more. The nature of the models has changed dramatically. And that's enabled us to address a broader variety of use cases. And then the ability to sort of bring the models, the enabling infrastructure to actually, put models into production, do that at scale has changed, and that's allowed a much broader set of companies to sort of incorporate AI into sort of their products. Like at some level, those three changes, and all three of those changes have been happening for 20 years. And so when I was at Microsoft going back circa 2006, we were applying AI to advertising. We were saying, hey, look, we have all these ads, and if you can improve ad targeting by 10% on $1 billion business, that's another $100 million of revenue. And so if you can make an extra $100 million, you can afford to spend a lot of money on AI, and so we're spending a lot of money on AI. The challenge at the time was, go back again circa 2006, so 17, 18 years ago, the cost of implementing AI for most of the use cases couldn't be justified by the ROI. Because the fixed costs, like it just, between the team and the infrastructure, I mean, this is all pre-AWS, like before you knew it, you would spend $20, $30 million, maybe $50 million just to get off the ground. You fast forward to today, I mean, maybe Kamal will give you a discount, and for a couple of $100,000 you can get off the ground. So that's the difference, $50 million to a couple of $100,000, and 10 minutes later, the platform's up and running, you can put models into production, and you can do a variety of things with those models. I think to me, that's the fundamental difference over the last 20 years. What that means is that the range of use cases where you can use AI has exploded. Again, circa 2006, there were only two major use cases. There was either online advertising or there was the things that the three-letter agencies did. Those are the only two people that could afford AI. And then over time, as Kamal knows, as the model efficiency got better, as the cost structures changed, people started applying it in things like HR tech because you could afford to do it. And a lot of the people who did advertising, we look at all the HR AI applied to blog companies. If you go back 10 years ago, they were all, reformed advertising guys. We'd all sort of ruined enough people's days and weekends that we wanted to do something a little like, something a little better for the world. And so a lot of people did HR tech. You started to see it, spread to supply chain, procurement, a whole use cases. And then very quickly, I think people realize the challenge with AI and AI models is you do need the expert in the loop. You do need to customize business. It's not enough to have models. You need to be able to integrate them into existing applications and existing business processes. And that's what's created the opportunity for Ikigai and companies like Ikigai, that you can take very custom business processes, custom use cases, without having to build your own data science team and build your own models.
You queued up two things. One is really sort of Moore's law as it applies to this space, right? And then the second thing is a perfect handoff to Kelley, sort of really focusing on thinking about your journey with Hitch and the company that you built there. Talk about that development, incorporating AI into your work, and sort of what is that like, integration back into a large company like ServiceNow, maybe?
Yeah, so I think one thing in my background was that I was a CHRO for 13 years in technology. So I was sort of at the precipice of the problem statement. And I never intended to build software, but I increasingly got frustrated when I saw people leaving organizations with the skills that we needed, but we maybe just didn't see them properly. We couldn't send people for training because we didn't have time to send them away and hope that value would come back fast enough. And so, in the Valley, people would just walk across the street. And so it was quite frustrating. We'd be hiring those skills back, 3 months later. And so one late night, I just started to whiteboard a solution. If I could build something from the ground up, Nirvana, what would it look like? And it was the genesis of a talent marketplace. It was using skills matching to find the right people, the right work at the right time, learning in the flow of work, driving agility. And I think, I was a CHRO, so I applied that as an intrapreneur first, as a tool in a large enterprise, and then spun it out with venture capital funding and commercialized it to several customers. But the journey itself started to solve a problem. And one of the biggest problems with just building a marketplace was that was a repeatable, right? Someone else could build a better and bigger marketplace. What was novel was the actual skills matching and the algorithms behind it. So I spent a lot of the investment in data scientists and building those algorithms, which would be the moat, which would be the secret sauce to matching the right people to the right work, using skills as the common denominator. So if we think of a math problem and we're solving for X, I could attach AI to X, right? I could solve for a common denominator at scale, and I could drive all these outcomes. And when we did, actually unleash this technology inside of a large enterprise, we were saving a ton of money, but at the same time driving all these positive outcomes. And so as a CHRO is never, I repeat, never thanked in a public forum for HR software in my life, except for this one. That was a victory. But I think, the main thing is that, HR was one of the first, I think, to try to automate a lot of things and make it better, and taking all that great knowledge and applying it to HR, because there was a lot of low-level work that we wanted to put human beings to more strategic work. And I think that's the great thing about it, is we're seeing that. So, I was happy to report that there was a happy ending. Startups don't always have happy endings. And you asked how it's been at ServiceNow. ServiceNow has done a lot of partnerships with AI, NVIDIA, Hugging Face. AI is being pulled across the platform. We are a platform company. And so we're on the precipice of helping customers with this transformation to AI, and we're using it ourselves. I'm glad to say we're drinking our own champagne, not eating our own dog food.
Thanks so much. So right next to you is a potential competitor. I think I was talking to my friend Kelley, who said, oh yeah, this company, we keep bumping into this Eightfold guys. And so what's that about? Yeah. So Kamal, thinking a little bit about the sort of sales journey, and particularly around education, talk a little bit about your experience with sort of bumping up against sort of enterprises who aspired to use AI, but really couldn't actually execute. What were the problems and issues there?
I think there were three broad buckets. Number one was enterprises are littered with process applications. Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, these are all process apps. So how do you get execs to think like a data company? That was number one. And what worked was, if you could actually surface insights from their own data and then marry that with externally available data, so now they're getting insights from the market data also, that is always an eye-opener. And most good execs will be interested in what am I missing. Second one was change management, and that is still the biggest issue. Like in our case, we're very good at forecasting, thanks to this gentleman. Every project that we have dealt with, we can improve the forecast by 20-30%, which is great. But the first reaction is not, oh, that's wonderful. It's like, oh my God, whoever has been doing the forecast now needs to tell someone that I actually was off by this much. And these guys, without knowing our business, can actually improve it. And then the exec needs to go to the CEO and also say the same. I need to spend money because we've been off by so much. That really is the change management. How do you make them feel empowered versus feeling threatened? And that's the expert in the loop part comes into it. And the third part is really, how do you open the mind to what can be done? And the thing for me that changed 3 years ago was I was doing this eightfold pitch to Morgan Stanley. I think the lady was CEO -2. And I did my mumbo jumbo interview, the AI platform for blah, blah. She didn't get it. And then she was very polite. She said, what questions can you solve for me? So I paused, took a deep breath, and I gave her 5 questions. And that worked. She actually didn't ask me to give answers to those questions, but she could figure out the rest. And that I've continued to use because I don't need to answer everybody's question. I just need to get them to think about the business on what we can do with data. So those 3 things have been proven to be very good. And that's basically why we have these workshops now. Because it's not like we are walking in with answers. We're just getting people to think differently.
And I think so. Part of the sort of innovation exercise was the potential that you see in the board, right? And then the reality. There is a gap here, and I think in large part this is why I'm excited again about sort of, not to beat a dead education horse, but really excited about the opportunity for education to address all these things. So now I have a list of more questions, but I want to turn it over to the audience. Are there questions or comments? Emotional outbursts? Don't throw stones, but anyway, there's some candy back there. I think those Lindors would be nice. Yes, please. Please tell us who you are and ask your question. Sure.
Nitin Nugal, I'm with the Dentro. I have a part A, part B question. One is, in your view, is AI a winners take all market, similar to some of the consumer internet models that have evolved? Or are you going to see a lot of basically AI innovation that's going to be basically kind of somewhat more equitable across the entire space? And then the second part is, since data is key, or scale of data is key for AI to be able to predict outcomes, do the larger enterprises that already possess all this data have an unfair advantage going into using AI?
Both great questions. Let me try to take them one at a time. I think at the highest level, AI is a broad enabling technology. And so I don't see it as a winner-take-all at all. I think, if I just put my startup investor hat on, I believe that we'll have a couple of dozen decacorns coming out of this AI wave. I think of a dozen decacorns that will come out of the application category and a dozen that will come out of the platforms and infrastructure category. And I think there's a couple of hundred unicorns that will come out of both AI applications and AI infrastructure. There's massive new markets that are going to be opened up. Markets that were relatively small. I'll give you a trivial example, just to use an example. I have a company called Converse AI that is taking voice calls, that digitally creates voice calls in real time for top of the funnel recruiting. You want to hire, a developer as a contractor, you want to hire a gardener, you want to hire thousands of jobs for which you hire contractors, and today there's human beings that do those calls. They buy software, they buy something called vendor management systems, VMSs. It's a tiny, shitty market, to sell VMSs. But by the way, selling voice calls using AI is actually a massive market, because the same company that was paying $25,000 for their VMS is a $250,000 customer when you're replacing the VMS with actually calls. So you're going to replace human tasks with technology. And that will create massive new markets across hundreds of different verticals and use cases. And I took this until someone came to me, the idea that I would invest in a company that was doing voice calls for top of the funnel recruiting for contractors in mostly blue collar jobs, I never imagined that you could build a $10 billion business in a niche like that. And today I think that company will have $10 billion in revenues over time. And I think there's thousands of those niches. So I absolutely, short answer, do not believe it's a winner-take-all market. I think there'll be different classes of companies. I think there'll be companies like Ikigai that are platform companies and that will enable hundreds of thousands of companies and customers to build applications on the top. And then there'll be use case specific application companies, Converse that I described as an example. And then there'll be infrastructure companies like Databricks and others. And each category has lots of opportunity. I think to your second question around data, look, the reality is large companies always have a certain set of advantages. Data is only one of them. They have data, they have capital. In theory, they have talent. And in practice, there's also the reality large companies take a while to move. They have conflicting goals, they have conflicting interests. The talent that they have is focused on incumbent products. When I was at Microsoft, who the hell at Microsoft wanted to work in Azure 15 years ago? Like this little thing that's in the cloud, why the hell would I want to work on that? Everyone smart wanted to work on Windows. Now that's changed, but it took 15 years to change that, and it took, a CEO to sort of knock some heads together. So I think large companies will always have certain advantages, and the reality is that in many, many markets, startups will win. And so I think, there's no one size fits all, and maybe is the headline to the answer. And I also think there's lots of interesting ways where the data advantages can be overcome. For example, again, and Devavrat is the expert in this, but the LGMs that Ikigai uses are not as data intensive. They don't require the same scale of data for training that, for example, an LLM does. And I think there's a lot of innovation ahead of us on the model side around models that are much more efficient in terms of the data required for training.
So I'm going to jump as the one lone large company representative, Kelley. I'm going to sort of throw the ball to you and thinking a little bit about the competitive advantages that ServiceNow might have and the connection to AI. How are you seeing that market play out? What are the things that maybe points of resistance or opportunities as you talk with customers?
Yeah, and so I think I agree with Ashu that the platforms, I think a lot of the innovation is going to come from startups, but I think overall the complexity, and I'll just take the HR side of the house for a moment, the sediment of technology that is out there is just too complicated. Right? It's just too complex. And so we're going to see the platforms kind of winning because they're going to have the integrations, they're going to have the scale, and they're going to get the greater adoption overall because the experience is going to be better. And that's clearly where ServiceNow is focused. Now, I'm very customer facing, so I'm out there trying to help particularly the CHRO buying centers understand digital transformation, where they have leverage, where they can take out complexity. One of the biggest issues around AI right now is around data, people data. You know, those of us that were HR executives have been scarred through GDPR efforts and protect data at all costs. And now we're saying, oh, just trust, ChatGPT and, all of this summarization and for ER cases and other type of things that are very, very sensitive. So I think the conversation is going more towards lean in, have expert in the loop. There will push you to higher value work. And we're experimenting with that first and then giving the trusted guided roadmap to our customers. But I can't emphasize enough, just like Ikigai, I think the platform play is where we're going to win because we just can't keep building sediment and complexity. They will not come. They will not come because that experience becomes fractured. And so even though like Microsoft has tons and tons of data, I don't think it's a winner take all by Microsoft either. But I do think that we have to look for opportunities to reduce the complexity for the user, and AI is, particularly generative AI, is going to be more highly adopted.
Okay, so now I'm going to try the quote, I'm going to rephrase somebody else's quote around this issue of trust. So bear with me, it wasn't my quote, but I gotta use it because I love it, actually. So I've heard this quote is a grain of truth, potentially divisive. The U.S. innovates, China imitates, and the EU regulates. And so, Kamal, we talked a little bit about this. There's the new EU AI Act, which was released last Thursday or Friday. They were cheering and toasting, and then Macron immediately afterwards said this is going to stifle innovation. But it's the reality if you're a large company and you're trying to create opportunity. So what do you see? What role does regulation see? Like, what do we do about this?
I think few times when you would have some entrepreneurs say, this is good for us. This is one of those. So there are a couple of things. About a month ago, the executive order came out of White House. Now that, while headed in the right direction, is not enough because that's just guidance. White House does not create laws, right? So that's the issue. So you need laws so that people know which side they want to be on. So that's number one. The EU law is actually very interesting because number one, they are trying to, and if you've been following it, it's very clear, they are after big tech. They are absolutely after big tech. And this one lays out that going use case by use case, what is high risk, like the examples in ER and medicine and some of these other things, which ones are not. And for the high risk, they're going to be very, very particular about what is allowed and what is not allowed. They're already addressing fines of violations. Issue with fines right now is, just like Ashu parks wherever he wants to park in Palo Alto, parking tickets are not going to slow him down, right? So that's the same thing with big tech. That just fines are not enough. And everybody is now starting to coalesce around is the accuracy of the prediction, whether it's coming through chatbot, because consumer apps are fine. I mean, okay, if a restaurant rating is off, big deal. Some of the other stuff, enterprise business, you just can't actually rely on that. Hallucinations are not an option. So I think it's headed in the right direction. But the bigger thing that they're still not calling out is, and where this whole thing started, if your business model is predicated on using the data you're collecting, that's where things start to diverge. And that's essentially the second thing you need to add on top, that where you're collecting data, you will collect data if you're an AI company, but then how are you making money off it? That's where the advertising businesses are in there after that. So I think it's interesting. Now, one thing I'll tell you is, once the law becomes, it becomes easier, because we went through in the last 5 years, just with GDPR, they were like, for 2 years, decisions were slowed down because the lawyers weren't clear on how much risk are they taking by letting in an AI solution.
So, Devavrat, I'm going to turn it over to you as now as the entrepreneur, having to sort of, you see these from a distance, these challenges and issues. How are you thinking about, so what does Ikigai Labs do in this situation in terms of building trust and making sure that we're doing the right things by the expected, in this case of the EU, the regulations, and now potentially in the US, those expected that may come down later?
So, one way to think about regulations, right, is that there is a law, there's a statement, there are rules that somebody has to satisfy. Now, of course, there's as I was made aware many times by Kamal, is that in EU, let me make sure I get this right. So EU versus US, right? In US, you are innocent until proven guilty, and in EU, it's the other way around, right? In either case, there is a law is a statement, law are rules, and you got a data and you got your practice, you got your audits, okay? If you are doing accounting, you're doing finance, you get audited and numbers get added up. What about AI? Well, the same thing has to happen in the context of AI too, because at least the way I teach my undergrad class, and when I teach statistics, machine learning or AI, I would say that one way to think about everything about AI is, take a coin, you want to find out the bias of it. I've tossed it 100 times, and then you average and you get a number. So AI is nothing but your data represented in one language, one format, and you're transforming it into something else. So coming to the rules, at the end of the day, whatever you observe, you have to convert it into the language and the statements that you want to verify. And this is where AI has a lot of opportunity to play. This is where things like classical things, as one would call in statistics, hypothesis testing, it's at its core. That's what the laws are anyways. It's like you make a hypothesis. When you sort of accuse somebody, you are making a hypothesis, and either you disprove it or you prove it. You prove it by not able to disprove it. Anyways, so the point is that sort of coming back to Ikigai, or more generally AI, I think there's a huge opportunity with AI itself to do regulation. If it were up to me, I think law should start getting personalized. There is no, I'm sure we can debate after this, depending on how you think about all the divisive issues that are out there socially right now in this country or anywhere. And if we put it into a context, you would see the other side. Because there is a person who believes that the other side is correct. There is a reason why that is the case. And one way to sort of actually work towards that and work towards a better thing is actually have personalization. And again, AI can help here. So I think, I feel it's super, super exciting in terms of, as a computer scientist, as somebody who thinks about AI, sort of where the future lies rather than sort of things are all done. And I think we're just getting started.
I recently had a CEO that I'm a founder that I'm kind of advising in Germany, and he's in the regulatory. He's subject to the regulatory environment in biopharma and auditing data. And one of the things I just posed to him to think about, which is kind of in line with what you're saying, is you can wait and have to follow every regulation, or you can actually experiment and move the market to where the regulators actually have to refine the law and personalize it. So I know I break rules because that's what entrepreneurs do. We just think about it differently, or how to get there differently. But that was sort of the question that I posed to him, is do not wait for the green light. start to look for ways around this, because AI could probably reform the way the regulators are thinking about it. And I told him a quick story that when I was developing my product and the pandemic had hit, in Germany, no one was allowed to work at home. The regulation actually said you couldn't work at home. So if we waited to say, well, it's by law, we can't do this, we can't put a talent marketplace and share and have people taking gigs and projects from home, we would have been out of business. And so we actually moved the regulation by actually experimenting and showing success. So it's just one thing I want to point out. And then I think the other issue we have overall with AI is just from the big company perspective, I just wanted to walk back to that for a minute, is that CEOs are asking functional leaders for an AI strategy, and they're all going into silos, right, of how they would develop it, the use cases they would have. And the board is asking the CEO, what's the strategy? And I think the big problem that these companies need is they need one. They don't need a strategy just for HR or finance. They need it across the board, which just goes to why platforms, I think, are going to answer a lot of the big problems.
Questions from the audience?
I'm Sunil Masand. I head up product at Avenir. We are a source-to-pay application provider on the ServiceNow platform, actually. You know, in the exercise, we went through reality. And all of us gave answers about, you know, how is AI being used from our own experience around how we are using it. But the reality is when you talk about enterprise applications, we don't have the answer. Only our customers have the answer. The question that I'm getting to is that, you know, I have no doubt, you know, we'll produce the, you know, we'll capitalize and deliver the best technology. We'll solve the best problems. But but I want to hear from Ikigai. How are you thinking about doing the actual integration back into those enterprise applications and in delivering those insights and results from AI in the middle of the business process to the end user? I mean, we are not talking, I'm not asking about execs. I know execs we'll be able to sell to them, but ultimately the success depends on how it's actually being used. One part of the answer, Kelley, you gave us, which is the platform play. The platform, you know, immense flexibility. It'll help us deliver those insights in a flexible UX. But what else can we do? You know, any guidance from?
I'll give you a couple of things, and this is actually live active conversation both internally and with our clients. Even the customers actually don't know what they really want out of the AI stuff. So what we are pushing for is really first principle approach. In the AI world, when you do have more data and you can make sense out of it, how would you do your forecasting? How would you do your scenario planning? What does the back and forth look like? Can you do it? Can you do your forecast runs on a daily basis versus a monthly, quarterly basis? Can we improve the visibility to the forecast instead of a week before the quarter end to a month, 2 months, 3 months, so you can do something about it? So it's getting that thing going, and what you end up doing is you always end up with a much simpler solution than you would if you're just trying to do something better than what they've already had. So that, and it's not easy, but once you get that flywheel going, then it's a lot easier. And the intent is not to keep trying to get into a replacement market, because then it becomes a feature war, and then the legacy systems will prevail for a while. And there are only so many things you can replace, right? So those are the things that we're doing, that, okay, we need to provide something that's dramatically better, and so far, fortunately, we are. And that's what's opening the minds, and we're happy to actually have mutual risk. We don't do stuff for free, but we're happy to show you what can be done, and then move the ball forward. So keep de-risking, remove the friction, so the customer can move forward. And in our case, actually, most projects are like 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and you'll see quantitative difference. So speed is very important, because otherwise it's the same old stuff.
Yeah, and isn't there a great quote by Henry Ford that said if I'd asked customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? So to a certain degree, the power of the great question. I mean, I've heard you guys say that, you know, coming up with the top 5 questions, because they wouldn't be able to get there themselves. But in the process, the use case gets delivered, right? Right there. But they wouldn't come up with that use case on their own. So I think that's quite novel.
You've been at this AI thing for quite a while. As you project forward now, what are you seeing on the horizon for those of us who are in the room, large companies, small investments? What do you see?
You know, at some level, I would say it's more of the same. But what has changed in the last year is I think we've really hit an inflection point. AI has gone mainstream in a way that I had never seen before. I think it's gone mainstream akin to the way the internet went mainstream in '95 with Netscape. And that's the fundamental change. I mean, Kamal and I, more Kamal than me, were selling Eightfold software. You were selling software at Hitch. We would pitch AI, and everyone's like, you know, this AI thing gets scary. Do we need it? How do you spell it? Do I want it? Everyone wants to buy AI software. So why? Because everyone has an AI strategy. They've got a box to check. Now, there's always, you know, tons of challenges, always. But the fundamental shift from push to pull has happened across the market.
There was no embryonic stage. Gartner has this, you know, the hype cycle. We went so fast up that cycle, and it's also like the iPhone, right? We just accepted it. Like, this is the new way forward. So I think you're absolutely right. This fast the internet came, this is coming. And so we're not justifying this now for everyone. People are getting more educated, although education can still continue.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and I think what that's going to do is it's an explosion. I think we will see 10x more next year, 100x more, and 1,000x. I mean, sitting in '95, I mean, some of you are old enough to remember, like, we couldn't have imagined Amazon today. We couldn't have imagined Instacart. We couldn't have imagined the things we take for granted in our daily lives in '95, and we take them all for granted. And I don't think we can imagine the things that AI will do for us. Yes, Waymo is cool, and I think everyone should drive a self-driving car or sit in one, but it's just the beginning. I think there will be applications that we can't even dream of.
Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to our amazing panelists.